This is the Double Doinkers Fantasy Football Podcast with Willie J and Nick Meyer. You are listening to the NFC West and NFC North breakdown from 2026. This is the pre-season breakdown of both divisions. And welcome in. We will be starting with the NFC West. I'm going to say that right here very loud and clear because if you are listening on Spotify, you're going to notice that there is a week delay between the two. And I do that because I want this to be digestible for the people. I can't have you eat something that you can't get through your body. With that said, hey, how's it going, Willie?
Hey, it's going good, Nick. I'm excited to hop into it. I've been dealing with computer issues the past 2 hours, but I finally I borrowed my girlfriend's laptop in order to record this episode. So shout out Isabella.
Yeah, shout out. Hey, you know what? It's that sort of day. Okay, so like you got computer issues. I did a field trip, a graduation, and 2 dentist appointments with my kids today. We're getting through this, but here is the cool thing: is we've got 2 amazing divisions to talk about today. Both the NFC West and the NFC North. We'll leave the NFC North for later because that's Willie's got a special NFC North connection here. We're gonna move kind of quick through this because that's where my head's at. So we're gonna jump into some news. The news here will be mostly just about NFC East and NFC South because everyone else we're going to capture at some point during this podcast in the upcoming future. So if you got some news and you're like, hey, well, what about those AFC teams? Don't worry. We'll talk about them, just not right now. That's coming later. Okay. So stay tuned. Some cool things that have happened since we talked last about 2 weeks ago. AJ Brown did get traded. So we were speculating on what would happen if AJ Brown got traded and what it would mean for Devonta Smith. Willie's very positive about Devonta Smith, and it did happen. AJ Brown is traded to the Pats.
He was announced 4 months ago, and then before the draft, people were talking about it happening after the draft, and then the draft happened, and it was like, okay, well, it's not going to happen until June 1st, even though it was an open secret. But we'll talk about AJ Brown and to the Patriots and what that means when we cover the AFC East, but. You know, I'm even higher on Devonta Smith, I think, than I was before. Now that it's actually happened. So.
Well, it's kind of wild that the Eagles would ever trade away their best player of all time, self-proclaimed, of course. And so this changes the outlook on a few of those players. Like Devonta Smith, he clearly has the opportunity to be one, and then Mekhi Lemon, I think also this just raises his ceiling. We didn't know exactly where that was going to be at, but without AJ Brown there, it can't just be Devonta Smith and Goddard. Mekhi Lemon's a first-round drafted wide receiver who kind of slid. I think you can see him with a pretty high volume role after this trade.
I think so too. I think he is more akin, not quite there yet, but he's more akin to like an Emeka Egbuka was last year, compared to Matthew Golden. He's probably like in the middle. He's not quite as alluring as Egbuka, but again, I was pretty low on Egbuka going into fantasy last year, and he proved me wrong at least for the first half. So, yeah, Mekhi Lemon, he's one whose ADP I would watch. It could be worth it.
Yeah, definitely. Staying with the NFC East, we have Odell Beckham Jr. rejoining the Giants. So he's back with Harbaugh, back with the Giants. It's a weird mixture of reunions happening for Odell Beckham Jr. here, and of course. Him being back with Harbaugh, that's only noteworthy because maybe this is the only place he could get a shot. Him being back with the Giants is huge because last time we saw him here, their relationship had burned to the ground. So that to me, that signals 2 things. 1, Odell Beckham Jr. No longer has options. And 2, this Giants regime truly is changed.
I mean, if you want to tell me if I'm more excited for Odell Beckham Jr. or Jalen Hyatt, I'll say Odell Beckham Jr., but we'll have to see. I want to see more than just maybe, exciting training camp videos of him catching a touchdown pass from Jameson Winston before I consider drafting him. But there's a sliver of hope there just because of the lack of options on the team.
Yeah. And Malik Neighbors is apparently on track for returning week 1, even though this move would signify something maybe different. So I don't know if there's even space for him if he is healthy. Like, is anything fantasy wise or fantasy relevant?
Yeah.
to stick with the Giants for a second, Scadaboo is participating in team drills. So if you are in on Scadaboo, I don't see any reason why you should be worried about him right now. It seems like everything is very positive. If he's already participating in the team drills this early on in the offseason, he's going to be fine. He'll be playing week 1.
Yeah, as grueling as his injury was, at least it wasn't an ACL tear. Like, it looked really nasty, but it was a clean break of a bone. So that's something at least to consider in terms of recovery.
Yeah. Moving on to the NFC South, because the rest of the NFC East has been relatively quiet. And this is not necessarily fantasy related, but we want to shout out good news every once in a while. Dave Canales, the head coach of the Panthers, found out he had cancer, and it has been successfully removed.
Oh,
just so it was a burst news. We didn't hear that he had cancer, then we wait and find out later that it got removed. But we just found out that he had cancer and it was removed all in one bout. So good for Dave Canales. And I'm going to give his reminder a shout out here. He says, remember to get your yearly screenings. I don't know what cancer screening exactly it was, but apparently if you need them, do them. You know.
Oh, good for him. I mean, that's a good sign for the Panthers. I'll double down on predicting them to win the division.
Well, and it's like their recent. I was going to say the last two head coaches. That's not exactly right, but Ron Rivera and Dave Canales both getting cancer and having different versions of it. It's good to hear that nothing's come of that. Nothing negative, anyways. So let's jump into the divisions. Let's just go ahead. Let's just rip through this, right? And so the NFC West is where we're going to start. So the NFC West last season was a just dominant division. We had 3 teams go to the playoffs. Of course, 3 teams finishing with 12 wins or better. And the Cardinals. So the Seahawks finished 14-3. They, of course, went on to win the Super Bowl. We all know about what happened there. The Rams finished 12-5. High contender for the Super Bowl had it not been the Seahawks. And they likely would have won as well. The 49ers finished 12-5. Kind of a rough 12-5, but whatever. Doesn't really matter. You still finished 12-5. The Shanahan thing is just so real. He's such a good coach.
They had some games that weren't quite like the Heart Attack Bears in terms of all the close fourth quarter finishes, but they won some games that they should have lost. And a lot of that was on coaching and just good fourth quarter decisions. So.
Yep. And as we go through this, I'll also explain some of the stats, and you'll see like kind of what the shakedown difference was. And then the Cardinals are out here finishing 3-14.
This year or last year?
Well, I have a fun little fact coming up when we talk about the Cardinals. But last year they finished 3-14, and of course they decided that what they saw to Jacoby Brissett in the 3-14 season was enough. They're going to bring him back. But we're not going to start there. Instead, we're going to go top down. You know why? Because realistically, in the NFC West, you might as well talk about the top. So we're going to start off with the Seahawks. The Seahawks in 2025 were your Super Bowl winners. So enough kind of said here. They bring back a lot of the same roster. However, there is some differences. Of course, they lost Kenneth Walker III. He's over at the Chiefs now, and he dominated in the postseason. So you know that was an exciting move. They extended Charles Cross. That was a neat little extension, 4 years, $104 million. That is their left tackle. They drafted a guard, Bo Stevens. That was a 5th-round draft pick. They signed another offensive tackle, Bobby Hart. They lost their cornerbacks, 3 and number 4 this season. So, I mean, their defense was pretty...
Did Sam Howell get a ring? Was he on there? No, he was on the Eagles at that point.
Yeah, he must have been. Because right now they have Drew Lock and Jalen Milroe as the backups.
Right. Okay.
And I remember Jalen Milroe was there last year as well. But I imagine at this point Sam Darnold's going to be a fixture here for a while. Good for Sam Darnold. Their defense may have taken a hit, at least the secondary potentially, and Charbonnet, who tore his ACL in the playoffs, is likely to miss part of 2026. So
it was January, and I mean, assuming like best case scenario, that's a 9-month recovery. So that would put us in like mid-October, which really isn't like a completely lost season, and it's going to make his ADP drop quite a bit. So that'll be one to watch because he was even as like the backup. I mean, he was like 1B to Walker's 1A last year. I would imagine he was still. I mean, he was still going like 10th, 11th round. So I imagine he's going to fall pretty far this year.
Yeah, and he wasn't like the RB1 sort of play, but he was someone you could fill in as a flex pretty easily and enjoy it. Um, so there's holes here, right? So you let's talk about the fantasy relevant players that you really don't need to talk about. Jackson Smith and Jigba. We'll start here. Jackson Smith and Jigba, of course, had just an amazing season last year. Things couldn't have gone better for him. The only question I'm going to have a real simple question for you, Willie. One, can he or should we expect him to be the wide receiver one overall again?
I mean, just based on parity in fantasy in the NFL, I don't expect him to be quite as dominant last year. I mean, if he's as dominant this year as he was last year, I mean, he's already like clearly the best receiver in football. I don't think like even if he doesn't go up again in his career, he's already solidified himself. So if he repeats that, that would really blow me away. Having said that, I mean, he looks like he's going as wide receiver 3 right now, um, behind Jamar Chase and another receiver we'll talk about in the NFC West. And I mean, he's a cheat code. I mean, again, they're losing Clint Kubiak, which is probably the biggest question mark for this fantasy team as a whole. But they have the same coaching staff otherwise, and I mean, we saw teams adapt to JSN throughout the year last year, and start covering him more, double coverage, and like really seeing him as the focal point of the offense, and defenses adjusting to that, and it just really didn't make that much difference. I don't think he's going to have quite as an incredible season as last year, but he's still an easy first round pick. Um, and for better or worse, I mean, they didn't really bring any extra receivers to like be a clear wide receiver 2 behind him or take targets, which can help and hurt him. But yeah, I'm still excited.
Yeah, and I do suppose I buried the lead a little bit there. Thank you for calling that out. So they lost Clint Kubiak. They did replace him with Brian Fleury, who was actually with the 49ers last year. So he's the run game coordinator and tight ends coach. This is his first time as an OC, so it is a pretty significant change as far as that goes because Mike McDonald's not an offensive-minded coach. So
No.
this system could look pretty darn different
Yeah,
with Brian Fleury.
is he Brian Flores in a trench coat and mustache?
He's like, I am Brian Flores, but I do offensive stuff. But I mean, okay, think about this: the 49ers offensive run game coordinator, right? We understand why the tight ends coach is so important, but the run game coordinator in a system that last year had a kind of subpar, maybe even bad run game. This is just relying heavily on the past stats.
Yeah,
I'm interested by this because I do think that just offhand and maybe hot take, there is a lot of room down for the Seahawks squad, especially in offense. Like this offense could look a lot worse than it did last year, pretty easily.
it,
You can still have some offensive standouts, but I could see a world where like they score a lot less points.
it reminds me a lot of the Ben Johnson question from last year, and it's is it all like Ben Johnson or is Dan Campbell like really the stronghold of this team, similar to Mike McDonald and losing his OC and Clint Kubiak? I think that obviously Kubiak won the Super Bowl and Ben Johnson and the Lions did not, but in terms of like hotshot offensive coordinator and a great system, like they're pretty comparable. And I mean, I would hope that for your Raiders that their hotshot OC turned head coach does something similar to Ben Johnson. But I think this is a good test to see, and I'm curious. I mean, you mentioned like the Niners' run game not being that great last year, which sounds blasphemous because they had CMC, but CMC's fantasy cheat codeness was because of his PPR upside and catching passes. Like, I mean, he still had a lot of rushing yards last year. I don't remember off the top of my head, but like the reason their run game was elite on paper was because of CMC's receiving ability. It wasn't just the run game. We really didn't see a lot of running back by committee with the Niners last year. So I guess Brian Fleury is a big question mark for me. With JSN though, I am still banking on his just connection with Sam Darnold and the amount of targets. I think that oftentimes when we're talking about fantasy receivers, I'm referring to PPR because that's the format I play in. A lot of people play in, and I think in PPR I would value JSN higher than in non PPR. Not like a huge extent, but I think that JSN's really big upside and possibility of is finishing as a top 3 receiver again would come from PPR. Just the amount of volume he may get, and that could change. But with the connection of Darnold, I just see that being pretty stable.
No, I agree with this. I think that what we saw from JSN last year was too much to ignore. It was almost the Cooper Cup effect, right? Like he had such a great season last year that regardless, they're going to pepper him with targets this year. So 100% agreed.
Yeah.
What about so like, let's talk about Jadarian Price. What are you thinking with Jadarian Price? He is a player that I'm interested in. Do you think that he has higher upside than Kenneth Walker did even last year?
Yes, but only with the Charbonnet injury news. I think that we saw the Seahawks bring in Emmanuel Wilson from the Packers, and other than that, they didn't have any major upgrades. They don't have any other big names on this run in this running game besides Charbonnet. I think that depending on how offense works out, it's possible that Price starts off really hot and slows down as Charbonnet returns. Um, I think a simple answer though is just that I think at the very least Price can deliver at his ADP. He can deliver in return value as Kenneth Walker did last year in the committee of Charbonnet. And Kenneth Walker wasn't going super high in drafts. I imagine Price is going to be going higher than Walker was at this point last year. So I would maybe temper expectations, but I don't see there's a very clear upside path where if you compare him to like another rookie running back like Jeremiah Love, I think Love has more upside and potential, but I think there's a safer floor for somebody like Price with the upside possibly banked in.
Mm-hmm. I do worry about how much his ADP is going to shoot up just because of the pedigree of being on the Seahawks and being a potential week one starter for multiple weeks. So, like, I wouldn't be shocked if he ends up in like the O'Marion Hampton range this year, where he's like going round 2, early round 3, and that feels a little rich.
It's a little rich. It looks like Mr. Price right now is going. Okay, so this is right now. I'm using the Fantasy Pros ADP because they seem to have the most up to date information, and right now Price is going around the RB25, which is definitely good value. I don't foresee him going like any lower than the fourth round when drafts come around, which is probably like where the highest I would take him. Maybe third round depending on the Charbonnet injury news, but I do think that Price has a very solid floor. And like I talked about in the draft episode, another thing boosting his pedigree is the fact that he was a first round pick. Like it's the Seahawks, but even if he was taken in the second round by the Seahawks, I think the first round with the last pick that still buoys him a bit. But I do really like Price's floor because I talked about, he played opposite Jeremiah Love at Notre Dame, but he is still such an elite talent that he got drafted in the first round. And he doesn't have a lot of mileage on his legs and his body because he was playing next to Love. So he's coming in pretty fresh. He has a lot of experience and talent, but he doesn't have like the same kind of workhorse, experience as like say Jonathan Taylor was when he came in from Wisconsin. He had like some of the most, I think like the most rushing yards in Wisconsin history and like some of the most rushing yards in Big Ten history when he was drafted by the Colts. So regardless, I mean, Price is an RB1 on most teams, but I think he really fits ideally in Seattle when Charbonnet comes back because he's played running back by committee. So, yeah, I would temper expectations, but I still like him to return what K9 did last year.
Now, let me ask you another question about the Seahawks. And we got some names here, right? So let's talk about AJ Barner, Elijah Arroyo. I'm not going to count Saubert. He's just not the right sort of player. Well, let's just talk AJ Barner and Elijah Arroyo. Do you think either of these tight ends emerges as a tight end that you should care about in fantasy drafts?
I would not get your hopes up, but at the same time, like we did see Barner reliable at times last year. I think he came up pretty big in the playoffs. He got a couple touchdowns, and both him and Arroyo are pretty young. Arroyo was coming out of Miami last year, so he's just a second year player. At least in terms of the pecking order, he was a clear number 2 behind Barner last year, at least in terms of targets. I don't foresee either of these guys getting drafted pretty high, but if you say you take like a mid round, like 8-9 ranked tight end, like you say you get like a Sam Laporta or a Jake Ferguson, if you want to like take a swing with your last pick on one of these guys, I think either one would be sufficient. I don't see Barner getting drafted higher than round 15. I mean, maybe some people will remember, but no strong preference. But I think either could return value as a dart throw.
Yeah, and it is a pure dart throw. Here's my mind, and this is based 100% on just nothing other than what my mind is putting together here. admittedly. So Brian Fleury being the tight ends coach and run game coordinator of the 49ers. And of course, we see a 49ers team that has George Kittle. So it's understandably heavy on tight end passing when he's around. I could see one of these guys kind of slotting into that role, especially because both of them have the kind of athletic ability to be a great receiver. But that's not to say they will. They haven't shown it. So this is just a 100% pure speculation and hope we get more tight ends.
Well, at the same time, like we saw Jake Tonjes have some moments last year in this tight end system, and Jake Tonjes was catching passes with arguably even less, or arguably even more competition than were coming in to the Seahawks this year of their receiving game. So like if there's a possible breakout where AJ Barner becomes wide receiver 2 on this team, because I mean, besides Cooper Kupp and Rashid Shaheed, who I've seen Shaheed getting a lot of draft. Buzz. At least I did a couple mock drafts, and he seemed to be going like pretty high, higher than I expected. I don't know. Do you have any wide receivers outside of JSN that you're targeting, or have any?
This is great because this was my next question to come up, anyways. I have a hard time with these wide receivers because I think it's just going to depend on ADP game for both of them for me. Cooper Kupp, 1 year older after a season that like last year fantasy wise wasn't particularly great. Like he had moments, but he didn't put together a whole season that helps your team. Rashid Shaheed, who was phenomenal on special teams, but really kind of almost non-existent as a wide receiver on this team. Like, do we think that this extra offseason is going to change that? I have a hard time seeing it. I just don't know enough about Brian Fleury and the way he uses extra wide receivers. I do know that Cooper Kupp is skilled. I do know that Rashid Shaheed is skilled. I don't know that, and they play two really different roles, right? Cooper Kupp plays like middle possession at this point in his career, and Shaheed is just fly down the field, toss me the ball deep. If I was going to take a flyer, Shaheed is the guy who I'd want because I think that like boomer bust is where you'd get him, but I don't feel confident in it. He is someone who's got to be after mid rounds.
After mid rounds, it looks like I've seen him higher on other sites. It looks like on here he's going about wide receiver. Where is he? Wide receiver 57, which seems like pretty low. I've seen him higher on other sites, but he's going around the same range as Jalen Coker and Wan'Dale Robinson. So, there's maybe some guys with more upside, but I agree. I think he's pretty boomer bust, and things could change with this offensive scheme. But he was so skilled as a return man and on special teams last year. I would wonder, like, why would you want to move away from that? Why would you want to use him more as like an X wide receiver when you have him as this return man?
If I'm ranking those three, I think Coker I like just based on potential for like solid all the time role. Like he could be a player you can just lock into a slot. Then Shaheed for the boomer bust. Then Wan'Dale Robinson. I don't know. Wan'Dale scares me a little bit. They just drafted a super high end wide receiver one. I know that you've got the connection from the New York there, but come on, man. It's just I don't know. He worries me. So out of those three, I'd slot Shaheed pretty solidly in the second slot.
There's one other guy that I think is my sleeper on this team. That would be Torrey Horton. Just because he was looking pretty good last year as a rookie, and then he got hurt and wasn't even a factor in the playoffs because of his injury. So, like, I think he was also being used a bit on special teams as well. But if Shaheed really locks into that special teams role, and we see Torrey Horton consistently in 3 and even 2 wide receiver sets, I think he's someone to look at just because he's kind of been forgotten with the injury.
I love Jake Bobo just because of his name. There's really no other reasons. So let me run through their stats last year just so you get an idea. Last in how good their offense was. Last year they were the third highest in points scored, 8th in total passing yards, 11th in total rushing yards. And that wasn't it. They were 6th in defensive yards per game, 3rd in rushing yards per game, and 1st in defensive points allowed overall. So they were one of these rare mixtures of a defense that was completely dominant with an offense that was also very, very good. You have to imagine if Clint Kubiak leaving, it scares me, right? This is kind of like my end thought with this team. Is this team I would almost downgrade all of them just a little bit from what they're going to be drafted because Clint Kubiak leaving brings up the biggest potential hole from what you expect versus what you're going to get. of
Yeah.
any team in the NFL right now because they just won the Super Bowl. Vibes are great. However, they lost a big part of what made that happen, and their head coach is a defensive head coach. He's not going to hold that offense together. That offense could fall apart in a second. And you're hoping that Sam Darnold, who has learned a lot, don't get me wrong, but he's the glue.
Yeah.
Is that glue going to stand up?
Yeah, it's hard to say. I think that of all the big head coaching hires, or maybe there are some that were bigger, like John Harbaugh, than the Clint Kubiak hire. But I think Clint Kubiak was pretty comfortably the quintessential like hotshot OC turned head coach this year. And in terms of fantasy, like he was the biggest offensive coordinator to depart from his team, and that's especially significant because the Seahawks offense was so good last year. So I agree with the slight downgrade on everyone, but I think there's a lot of safe floors here too.
Fair. Okay, let's move on to the Rams because the Rams are fun to talk about. So the Los Angeles Rams, they finished second in the NFC West last year at 12-5. Of course, tied record with the 49ers, so we're splitting differences here. They have made a lot of big news recently. So their offensive roster, as far as the people you're looking at to draft, it doesn't really look that different at this point. You still got Matt Stafford, you still got Kyron Williams, you still got Puka, you still got Devontae. The tight end is still just choose your poison and hope maybe that one of those guys ends up being the tight end one. Let's talk about the players you can't draft because there's some important things that are happening here. I'm going to start off with the people they lost because after that we'll get to talk about the people they gained. So they lost Tutu Atwell. A little bit of the wide receiver depth is gone. They lost Jimmy Garoppolo. Who cares, really? I mean, they gained Ty Simpson, so it doesn't really matter. They did lose Rob Havenstein. Pretty big offensive line lost. And then DJ Humphries as well off of the offensive line. Puka Nacua lost his mind. Kind of, and I joke about that, but like he really lost his mind. Like he's going in a bad direction, PR wise at the very least, if not mentally. I can't make that call, but
I'm grateful he's at least been out of the spotlight. He hasn't been posting on social media since at least February.
Since whenever he bit that person.
Yeah, at least he shut up for now. At least, I think that he has not signed an extension yet. Is that correct?
I believe it is correct, and based on the defensive moves they've made, I am wondering if the LA is ready to balk on giving Puka the extension in general.
It's crazy though because it would be one thing if he was drafted in the first round a few years ago and they could just pick up his fifth-year option. He'd still be paid, but he was a fifth-round draft pick, so he's making a couple million a year, like compared to every other receiver at his talent level, or really most receivers that are starting in the NFL. He's not making very much money. He's making a rookie scale fifth-round pick contract. So, those are the kind of guys that are usually prioritized in terms of giving money. So the fact that the Rams haven't yet, and obviously they pivoted to their big defensive trade, brings up some questions. It doesn't concern me for his fantasy value this year, but it's something to consider. And also the other Rams starting, I think, right tackle, Alaric Jackson, just got arrested on domestic violence charges.
Yeah.
I don't know if, again, the NFL, we don't really know where things go with that and their morals, but there's some offensive line changes which could have some effect, even if it's not throughout the whole season. It could shake up some things up with training camp and
Alaric Jackson is listed as their starting left tackle right now, so things have changed up. Like if they lose Rob Havenstein and then also lose Alaric Jackson, where are they going to go? But okay. Here's what they did to make up for it, and we'll see why in just a moment. They traded, and they lost Jared Verse, which I think is a big deal in this. And they lost a first round pick. Who cares? Rams a first round picks. It really doesn't matter. But they added Myles Garrett, the sack record leader of all time in a single season, just last season. They added Myles Garrett. Aaron Donald is likely going to be coming back, and they added Trent McDuffie to this defense.
Yeah, and the other Rams corner or Chiefs corner, his name is escaping me, but he was starting on the outside opposite McDuffie for the Chiefs this year. So they have two starting corners for the Chiefs on their team. And yeah, McDuffie, that was already significant enough because you can make an argument the Rams, I mean, it's not really an argument. The Rams' biggest weakness down the stretch last year was their secondary. So when they already upgraded that, and then they bring in Myles Garrett, like that defense. I mean, we don't often talk about fantasy relevant defenses, but I think the Rams are a pretty early favorite to be taken, maybe a little bit too early in fantasy drafts. I usually always wait, but I could see them being the 101 draft for defense.
It is hard to argue against it at this point. But if you look at last year, so the defense, which was a fairly good fantasy defense, the stats play out this way. They were 19th in passing yards allowed, hence the secondary renovation. They were 12th in rushing yards allowed, which a little shocking that they didn't end up top 10 in either of these because it felt like they were a lot better than they ended up being. And they were 10th in points allowed, so it wasn't just like a bend don't break thing. They weren't bad. 10th is good, but it's also not great.
Yeah.
And I can understand why this was the area they wanted to look at, because let's talk about last season. First in total yards. This is offense now. First in passing yards. 7th in rushing yards, and first in points scored. This is an elite offense. Like, dumb elite. Best passing offense in football is an offense you want parts of in fantasy. And so my question to you, and this is interesting because they lost their offensive coordinator as well. Not that it matters so much with Sean McVay as the head coach. They changed it over to the guy who ran the passing game coordinator last year, Nate Shihasi. I'm pronouncing that wrong, and I know I am, and I apologize to Nate. But they added an assistant head coach in Cliff Kingsbury.
Yeah.
Do we just see all of the offensive players on this team play the same exact roles they did last year?
I mean, the media's been talking about like, oh, they're looking towards the future because they drafted Ty Simpson. I'm kind of split on a Ty Simpson choice. I think if he'd been later in the first round, it would have been a slam dunk. But it doesn't matter. They brought in McDuffie and Myles Garrett, so they are planning for the present. They are going all in, and there's really no reason for me to doubt that these players can't replicate what we saw last year. Especially Stafford. I mean, there was no significant pass catchers that came in, but like, he put up huge numbers last year with the squad that's still there. And I think that Stafford is still going around like an early QB2 kind of QB flex range. And he's going to have some dud games, but there's no reason to like sleep on him. I think that he could be a great quarterback for your fantasy team to start each and every week. So he's a really great value right now. I don't see him going as a top 10 quarterback, even though he very well could finish as one. And I think Puka, like, legal stuff, mental stuff notwithstanding, he missed a couple of games last year of injury, but wouldn't say he's an injury prone wide receiver. I wouldn't bank that in super high into his ADP. I mean, we talked about that a bit last year, but he completely delivered. And someone, at least in the fantasy, I haven't like looked, consumed much fantasy content at all, just looking at ADP mostly. But I think Devontae Adams is a little slept on. He was my best take I had last year. I said that he could be a very, very relevant wide receiver in fantasy, and he surpassed my expectations with touchdowns, but just also the amount of red zone looks and targets he got. So I think that Devontae is probably still my favorite piece of this Rams team, and I know he's another year older, but so little has changed about this passing game that I don't see any reason why Devontae and Puka can't at least come close to replicating what they did last year.
Devontae was just disgusting fade routes in the end zone, over and over and over again. And it still works. It just works amazingly. I don't see why they would go away from that, really. Because the offensive coordinator did change. And I was the one who mentioned this. Sean McVay isn't. He has control over the offense.
Yeah.
So he knows this thing works. Now, with Puka, I'm less worried about an injury and more worried about a suspension at this point, to be real.
It's funny because we talk about, suspensions not really being a thing in the NFL per se, but with the amount of stuff that was coming out and his behavior, he does seem like a prime example of a young player that Roger Goodell would maybe want to make an example of in terms of just like an accumulation of different incidents. And, we don't have any current pressing legal things, I don't believe. I think the biting charges were dropped, but within the span of a month, he was, he bit a woman. He was going absurd on social media, and he just had a lot of just craziness going on. And in a vacuum, not having major pressing legal charges isn't a cause for concern, but also like just based on his behavior, it's something to monitor at least.
Well, and you can find the bite pictures online.
Yeah,
I think to me that's always the thing. Is like if you can find proof of it and it gets out to the public, that's what's going to make the NFL act. And Puka is just doing things in a very obnoxiously obvious and public way.
yeah.
Like hanging out with streamers and doing stuff. Stop that.
Exactly, and that's why I was grateful that he stopped having a social media presence the past few months because like it'd be one thing if like the charges were dropped because it couldn't be proven, but the charges were just dropped as far as I'm aware, but it was proven, like it was proven. So there's nothing to really dispute there. Um, I think that's my hesitation with him, but I still think he's a first round pick in fantasy. I mean, again, there's been such little changed. I just feel like everything around the Rams on the defensive side got better. That the offense is only going to get buoyed by that.
He is so good. So let me ask you about the positions kind of then that we're not as sure of, right? So let's talk about running back because Kyron Williams delivered last year, but he didn't deliver in necessarily the most efficient or fancy way. We saw Blake Corum become more of a factor in this offense. When with the defense seemingly ready to become more stout, you'd see a run game buoy from that. Is Kyron Williams or Blake Corum, like or maybe both? Are they people who you would be willing to draft in the first half of a draft?
I think so. I was looking here, and Kyron Williams, I think, has historically gone around the late second, third turn, and right now his ADP is mid to late third. That could fluctuate, and I do like him there as long as he's not. And again, this is depending on your draft. I don't really like him as my RB1 per se, but at the same time, like if I manage to get like, you know, somehow like I don't know, like Puka and Malik Neighbors is my first two picks, then Kyron Williams is my RB1. That's fine. Or ideally though, like if you got like Amon Ra and Saquon as your first two picks, and then Kyron Williams is your RB2, that's also fine. So it really depends on the strategy of your draft. I just wouldn't take big swings before him and then rely on him as your RB1. But I think that we saw enough touchdowns from him, and this offense is still going to be as good at getting in the end zone that we can rely on him. Having said that, though, I do like Blake Cora maybe a bit more at ADP. It looks like he's going around pick 93, which is RB 34. Can't really do math right now, but I
It's
want to
like
say
seventh, eighth.
seventh, eighth. Yeah, maybe like a little bit like eighth, ninth, depending on where you draft. And I do like him there. I mean, he is. I guess I think in simplistic terms, I kind of view him as a higher upside Zach Charbonnet from last year. Not in terms of talent, but in terms of the amount of points we're going to score. And obviously, the Seahawks offense was elite. That's not the point. It's just that I think that he's probably going to get more touches than a traditional 1B to a 1A. And I think he could just really provide value as a flex. Maybe if you're not, maybe not your flex every single week, but on certain games. And if one of the ever goes down, like this run game is still pretty solidified as a big piece of this offense. And with the defense getting so much better, I think that you don't want to predict injuries, but like there's league winning upside from either of these guys if he ever goes down. And I think that at least in terms of a flex play for Corum, I think that he's somebody to look at. His ADP is pretty good for this good of an offense.
Yeah, and so Corum's someone you may want on your team regardless of whether or not you have Kyron, or do you think it's like handcuff dependent?
See, I would really kind of hate to have both on my team as much as they could return value. I think that Corum, if you can snag him as like your RB4 or maybe even RB3, depending on the makeup of your team, that's like a pretty solid flex. Because with flexes, maybe you're not starting every week. You want to have a solid flex that you can slot in that can provide like really big upside on a given week. And I think Corum, like if he's hanging out on your bench, I mean, you can just throw him into your flex. I think his floor is safe enough and his touchdown upside is significant enough that you can get excited about having him. So I like both.
Okay, and I'm gonna ask you a question, and this is gonna be in an awkward format. So get ready. We're trying something here. The tight ends of this team: Colby Parkinson, Tyler Higbee, Terrence Ferguson. I want to add Max Clare in there. I'm just not ready for it yet. Draft, drop, trade.
For between those three,
Yes.
drop Parkinson, drop Higbee, drop the other 5 tight ends they have. I think if there's 25 rounds in fantasy draft, I would not take a single one. There
Yeah,
is
okay.
too many tight ends on this team.
There's Max Clare being added to it just really muddies that water so disgustingly.
Even if he wasn't, even if he wasn't, like Higbee was, I think, out for part of last year, and he's like the OG guy. Parkinson was probably the most consistent. I think I started him a couple weeks, but God, I mean, I was excited about Terrence Ferguson going into last year. I did a whole like TikTok video about him coming into this
He
offense.
dropped one touchdown, and they're like, "Get out of here, bud! You're never gonna see us again."
Well, I was so excited because it's like, okay, second round rookie tight end on this great offense. Like, he can come in and make a splash. And he had his moments, but then they use another second round pick on a tight end this year. Like, what the hell? I get, and we talked about the 13 personnel format, 3 tight ends at a time. There's no world where I draft a tight end on the Rams this year.
It stinks because if you combined them all, they'd be so good. This is like that tight end by committee that we're seeing with the wide receiver by committees on other teams, and it's here with the tight ends. And my God, can we just get LA Rams tight end as a positional player, please?
Well, because Stafford also does target his tight ends quite a bit. I mean, like obviously in the red zone, he's looking at Puka and Devontae, but in terms of team target share, I believe that a lot of his targets went towards tight ends at a higher rate than most other teams, which would lead you to believe that tight end is a position to target, but it was just all over the place. you can watch one if Parkinson really breaks out or whoever breaks out, they're worth like looking at for picking up on the waiver. But God, no, there's no way I'm drafting a single one.
That's fair. Okay, so anything else you want to bring up about the Rams? I will say this: my chief worry about the Rams is that their defense gets a lot better and their O line gets a lot worse. Because losing Havenstein after all these years is going to hurt the chemistry, and if Alaric Jackson also is out, then I have a feeling that we're going to see an O line that becomes much more middling, which means these gigantic pass plays are just not going to exist. Everything's got to be short.
Yeah, and I mean that could benefit one of the running backs, but then there's a question of like, well, the O line adjusting, where's that going to go? There's some questions, but yeah, I'm feeling pretty safe about the big names at least.
Yeah, I'm digging. It's just Sean McVay offense. I think it's going to be fine. So we'll move on. Let's talk about the San Francisco 49ers, also finishing 12-5 in a much less dominant way. They didn't look as good, is what I'm trying to say. So the San Francisco 49ers finished 12-5. Let's talk about some of the roster changes real quick here. I want to start with the positive, because positive is good. Mike Evans has joined this team. Yeah, we all know Mike Evans as a dominant vet from another red team.
And Mike Evans, again, I always talk about recency bias. Like, okay, was he hurt last year?
Yeah, he was. He broke his collarbone and then had a concussion and all that stuff.
Right. Okay. So I talk about recency bias. Like, there was nothing on the field for Mike Evans last year. The Bucs offensive woes notwithstanding, that wasn't because of Evans. There's nothing on the field last year that suggested that he was regressing. And there's always a risk of, veteran receivers coming over and not having the same chemistry as they had previously. But like, he broke his collarbone. He didn't, his hamstring had issues, but the collarbone is like one of the better injuries to have because it doesn't really affect your game.
Yeah, and so they also added Christian Kirk. So they've bolstered their wide receiver room because Christian Kirk, regardless of what it's worth, he's a nice little piece for depth. And they had to do this because Brandon Ayuk is not with the team. And as far as I'm aware at this point, it would be an absolute miracle if he joined the team because he's been talking about the 49ers being scared of his belt. And it's a meltdown of, I don't even know what proportions.
Sad.
It is because he didn't get much money.
No, well,
his guaranteed contract got voided.
I just worry about his mental health. I mean, we talk a lot about receivers being divas, but his just feels a lot more. I mean, in one sense, targeted in some disdain for the Niners organization, but it doesn't feel very rational. I mean, he was driving by Levi Stadium going 100 miles an hour. And I got this sleeper notification yesterday that it said Brandon Ayuk fires shot at San Francisco, and I didn't know the context, and I wasn't about to just assume it was safe because he's really seemed to go off a deep end a bit, and it's a bit sad. And obviously, we didn't see him on the team last year, so there's not a whole season to season change up. But having Evans there and having Kirk in as a depth piece, I think, kind of solidifies that receiving option they were missing last year.
Yeah. I think that Brandon Ayuk should have talked to Kenny Galladay and figured out how to make the most amount of money with doing the least amount of work.
He did the opposite.
Before. Yeah. And also, maybe I shouldn't make a joke out of any of this, but I'm going to because that's where I'm at. This reminds me of like a Full Metal Jacket situation, right? Where Kyle Shanahan put him in the doghouse and yelled at him a whole bunch in his first rookie season. And so now he's just on the opposite end being like, you don't want to mess with me.
That's what it feels like. Yeah.
I mean, like you watch the videos, you're watching this guy who like, he definitely thinks he's in the right. Anyway, I'm not here to postulate on a receiver's mentals. I'm here to postulate on fantasy football stats. So we got some receivers on this team finally. That's something that they were missing last year, but we don't have George Kittle, or do we?
Or do we?
He's trying to get back week 1.
I don't think he should. I really don't. Not for the sake of the team, but just he's had injuries before, and he's not.
33.
He's what? He's 33.
33 Achilles tear.
Yeah, that's not a hamstring pull. That's a serious injury.
You're exactly right. I like the way you said it. He shouldn't. He shouldn't, but he's trying. And knowing Kittle, he might just do it. I am so concerned about George Kittle as a draft pick that I would take him off my board completely at this moment.
Me too. And he is a talent where this could be the kind of case where I eat my words, but I don't care. I'm not going to bank on winning my league by drafting George Kittle. I will let someone else draft him. Even if he's like in training camp in August and catching passes and running, like there's other tight ends out there that there's very little risk banked in. And I think his ADP is obviously going to reflect his injury, but he's totally off my board as well. Unless he like falls to like the 10th, 11th, 12th round, but he's not. I mean, he'll fade, but he was going in the 3rd round last year. I think he might have gone in the 2nd round in my league. Like, he's always going to be a high pick, and his fall is going to be like to the 6th round, 7th round, 8th round, maybe. But I wouldn't touch him before like round 12.
Yeah, it's still not a great idea for me. So, and then the other big change here is the offensive lines. They lost both of their left guards to free agency. So they've got a competition now between Connor Colby, Robert Jones, or Carver Willis, or rookie they took. You can't have like a ton of hope for these guys, but they're just one piece. They did sign a veteran backup, Vadarian Lowe, to back up Trent Williams, and that's important simply because Trent Williams, as we know, has gone through a lot of personal things and also is quite old for an NFL player. So this is a good signing, in my opinion, just because it attempts to ensure that him getting injured doesn't derail their season or their run game.
Yeah, I think that's a good move. Did they take a early tackle? No, because their very first pick was a wide receiver. We'll talk about, but they didn't prioritize drafting offensive line, the offensive line of the future in this draft at least. And obviously they have Trent Williams coming back, which is good because he's elite, but he is old and there's always that injury chance baked in. They also have Dominic Pooney, who was their right guard. I think was a rookie last year, and he's been really good. But again, that's one piece of the puzzle.
Mm-hmm. So there's a bunch of things on this team. I have so many things. So they added Raheem Morris as their defensive coordinator,
which I like.
Yep. So they replaced Robert Saleh with Raheem Morris. You're kind of just like collecting ex-coaches at that point. But of course, when you get these head coaches that are now becoming positional coordinators, I think they do a lot better afterwards. Not necessarily always, but I think this is a good hire in general.
I think so too. I mean, we saw like just last year, like Robert Saleh came over, again, the Jets to the Niners. It's not comparable, but like he quote unquote failed on the Jets, which he really didn't. He was a scapegoat for Rodgers, but he comes back to the Niners and has a great defense last year. And Raheem Morris, he was pretty bad as the head coach of the Falcons, but before going on the Falcons, he was defensive coordinator of the Rams, I believe, the year they won the Super Bowl. Could be wrong about that, but he was around that era. So definitely proved himself as a great coordinator. So I like that. I like that move a lot.
Yeah. So okay, let's talk about these players here. The first one I'm going to start with is Christian McCaffrey because that's the one that's going to be drafted the highest. He's the one who's going to be, the most interesting. He had a full healthy season last year, and he returned on that. If you had Christian McCaffrey, you enjoyed having him. Did he get hurt last year? I said he had a full healthy season, then I totally second guessed myself. But I think he was healthy the
I
whole
think
way through.
I think he played every game. He might have missed one game, but I don't think so.
So do we think that like him being healthy all season throws bad luck on this season? And this is something you shouldn't postulate injuries, but this is the one thing with Christian McCaffrey. If he's playing, you want to take him. If he's hurt, that's where you really run into problems.
This is going to be a hot take, and I respect anyone who disagrees with me because it's all about banking on upside often. But I don't like him in the first round this year. I like him if he goes in part of my strategy I've talked about, where you have a safe pick and a risky pick, and you kind of alternate. If you get a safe first round pick late in the first, I don't know who that might be around that. I don't know, like Amon-Ra St. Brown or whatever. And then you end up somehow CMC falls and you get him to like complement. That's a great mix of very, very, very high upside with risk banked in, and then a very safe floor, I think, with Amon-Ra. So I think that, or you can take CMC in the first round. I think you just need to strategize not relying on him and having safe floor options to complement him on your team. Personally, though, recency bias, he's going to go really high this year because he had a great season last year. And I don't want to bank on injuries, but when it comes to a 30-something running back who has been injured basically every year for his entire career, it's hard. It's a hard trend for me to ignore. And he's kind of the exception to the rule of like banking on injuries because I'm gonna bank on him missing some time this year. Maybe not a full season at all, but like he had an unbelievable amount of scrimmage yards last year, and he's older, and it's just how his career has gone. So I'm gonna fade him a bit based on ADP for sure.
Okay, so that's fair. And I will point out that last year the 49ers were 24th in total rushing yards. So they were bottom third of the league in actual rushing. And you can see that when you're watching Christian McCaffrey. The rushing just wasn't efficient. There wasn't any huge broken holes, anything like that. It was all in the short passing game.
Exactly. And that's a cheat code for him. But I think that with the talent that we've seen come in free agency and in the draft, that those targets are not going to be there this year at that level. Absolutely not.
I don't think they wanted to be there. It just doesn't make sense to only specifically use them that way. We see how it breaks down at the end of the season. Draftable pieces of this team, we've got Mike Evans, Christian Kirk, Brock Purdy, George. We talked about George Kittle. We don't have to talk about George Kittle again. Where are you taking Mike Evans?
So there's two answers to that. I think the one thing is that like there's the caution because of his age, which I'm not really factoring in, and then there's the caution of the other pieces around him, which are plentiful compared to last year. Because the Niners didn't have a great receiving core last year, but besides Evans, they do draft Deshaun Stribling in the early second round. He was the Niners' first pick, and obviously they bring in Kirk. And Ricky Pearsall has shown a lot of flashes. He's also dealt with injuries, but every 49er has. So there is some target share competition here, but at the same time, like he's not at the level for me where I was hyping up Devontae Adams as veteran receiver on this great offense. Like I don't see Evans quite replicating that because we might not see that for a while. With comparing it to Adams' season, but I think Evans is still a great pick. I think he's going to be the wide receiver one on this team, and I think there's a lot of factors going into it, but I see the volume there for him. I see again team chemistry. He's been on the Bucs his whole life. There's some nuance there, but I just see Purdy to Evans like getting a touchdown like at least 12 times. Like why not?
In both red teams, right? So he did choose a team where it's like, my jersey's the same as it was last year. We're good to go.
Yeah.
Do you have any hope? as far as drafting these other receivers? Like, are there dart throws that you want to make here?
Yeah, I think that the only reason I'm maybe more cautiously optimistic is because we didn't mention the loss of Jawan Jennings in free agency. So there are going to be some vacated targets from Jennings here, and that's with a team that already didn't have a lot of great receiving options last year. So there's quite a few quality targets that are going to be on this team. I am going to have to monitor Stribling's ADP because we see the Niners not really throw rookies in right away as starters or as volume hogs. Like Pearsall has had his moments, but he didn't break out at all until the very end of his rookie year. So if you took him 2 years ago, he was disappointing, and he had moments last year, but injuries kind of changed that. I think that I think that Christian Kirk is really just like a roster, like a roster or a waiver wire watch. I don't really have faith for him in his career at this point, but still a very solid depth piece. And I think Stribling, depending on where his ADP is at, I don't know. Or do you have any frame of reference for Niners rookies that proved themselves right away? I don't know.
No, no, mm-mm. No. Not in any significant way that I'm willing to trust Stribling immediately.
Yeah, and again, he's going to a great offense, so there's going to be that excitement baked into his ADP, I would imagine. He definitely worth a dart throw, though. If you get into the double digit rounds and you want to throw dart, like throw it on players on good offenses, and that's somebody to look at. I would definitely target him over Kirk
for sure. And here's Brock Purdy. I think if he ends up going in the same rounds as where he did last year, you're going to be much happier this time. I think he might even go a little bit later. I think he's going to be a solid quarterback. He's done very well for fantasy when he's been playing, and last year was kind of a weird season with the turf toe injury. And just, of course, not having any receivers. This year is going to look different. I think Brock Purdy could be a pretty good quarterback to take, especially in the mid to late rounds.
I think absolutely. I think he's probably the best value on this team. He looks like he's going about quarterback 13, right around the range of Matthew Stafford, and I would consider them pretty equal in terms of value. I think Purdy maybe has more rushing touchdown upside that kind of balances out Stafford's maybe overall passing upside. But I think Purdy could absolutely be your QB1. I mean, don't sleep on him. And I do like Pearsall for potential breakout, but he's going around the same range as like Jacoby Myers and some other like more clearly defined wide receiver ones. That makes me a little bit skeptical. But again, like, dart throws are dart throws, but on like an established offense like this, it never hurts to target some players. And I think there's absolutely a world where, Pearsall, Evans, or Stribling finish is like, in the top 25 receivers for sure.
Yeah, and it's not like the offensive system with Kyle Shanahan has always been good. The offensive coordinator, Clay Kubiak, it's his 5th season with the 49ers. His second is the offensive coordinator, but there's not, in theory, a lot of change on the offensive side coaching-wise, and these guys have shown clear ability to kind of shift around how their offense works depending on who's available and who's there, even week to week because of all the injuries. So, like, to give you an idea, all of those players were injured last year. Everyone was injured, especially in the passing game. And they're still 7th in total yards, 5th in total passing yards.
That's impressive.
With Mac Jones playing a bunch of games, too. So this is a team that it feels like everybody's plug and play. You talk about system players. The system in San Francisco seems to be working no matter who they're plugging in.
Yeah.
And we saw them kind of, work on their defense because their defense is really the weak point last year. They're 20th in total yards given up, 25th in total passing yards given up, a little bit better in rushing with 11th in total rushing yards and 13th overall in total points. So like their defense definitely gave them some runway to have to be better on offense, but the offensive system is kind of always there. That offense was just so devoid of receiving talent, and to finish 5th in total passing yards, either you believe that that's all CMC or you just believe that this system can work. And we saw Jawan Jennings have a handful of really great games last year.
He did. Yeah, I was pretty down on him, but I think because of the injuries and because of, just his familiarity with the system that he did provide on his ADP at times. So I think that we can easily see a Pearsall or Stribling kind of slot into that target role and, prove themselves. And I think that Evans is a fun pick because he's going around the range of other players that I would like. Right now he's going below Luther Burden, which is insane to me, and he's going around the same range as Jalen Waddle. And I would, based just on the offense alone, I would probably take somebody like Evans. So he's going around like wide receiver 22, and I think if you draft him as your wide receiver 2 and you have a solid team around him, I like his ADP.
Yeah, I agree with that. Uh, and with everyone else in this team, it's so amorphous. I would say be willing to take a shot on someone, but also be willing to ditch them if it's not working out, because there may be a lot of boom or bust just depending on game plan.
Yeah, and I just want to look real quick to wrap up. Jake Tonjes, this will definitely change, I imagine, as more news comes out. But he's going below Colby Parkinson and Terrence Ferguson and Greg Dulrich. Tonjes is maybe somebody to watch.
I would have Tonjes over the Rams tight ends. Dulcich, I'm low key. I might take Dulcich, but that's because
the target potential is there where it's not there for Tonjes, perhaps. But again,
we saw Brock Purdy though target those tight ends in the red zone over and over again. So this is just the thing. So if Kittle comes back from the Achilles tear, I feel like it's going to be to block.
Yeah, you can see that.
And then Tonjes can just catch some touchdowns. Let's move on to the next team because this team's going to be fun to talk about too.
I just want to add real quick that
sure.
We've seen so many Niners running backs taken in the third round. I don't care about Caden Black this year. Don't.
No, actually, one of the things that downgrades Christian McCaffrey a little bit this year is that all of his backups just look terrible. Like we've seen Shanahan make whatever work. It's just like his dad, like whatever running back you throw in that system, it's going to be awesome.
Yeah.
But good luck guessing which one ends up being it right now. Like Isaac Grendo was the guy. He's hurt.
Yeah, they still have Jordan Travis, or that's the Florida State guy.
Jordan James.
Mm-hmm. He was a rookie last year. Caden, it's just don't. Yeah,
it's ugly. It's ugly.
Yeah.
Okay, so the Arizona Cardinals, 3-14 last season.
Ooh.
So cool. They made a lot of news this season already because they drafted Jeremiah Love, 3rd overall. So there's your big change. They've gotten rid of Kyler Murray. They drafted Carson Beck. Their wide receivers are still Marvin Harrison Jr., Michael Wilson. They did add Kendrick Bourne, of course, which feels right. That feels like the right move. And then you've got Trey McBride. So this is a team that clearly saw it had a deficiency in rushing last year. They were 31st in total rushing yards and said, we're going to go fix that by drafting the best running back in this draft. And I think that is awesome. I'm going to start off this whole conversation asking you, Willie, does Jeremiah Love automatically fix their rushing problem?
In real life, yes and no. I think that we're going to see a possibly really fantastic run game from the Cardinals this year. Rest of the team notwithstanding. I think we saw some offensive line upgrades. They signed one of the Steelers guards. They drafted, I forget if it's Chase Basantis or Emmanuel. No, it was Chase Basantis out of Texas A&M. So they have Paris Johnson returning. They have a really solid O-line compared to last year. They made some good upgrades. And I think that with Love and the signing of Tyler Algier, and James Conner maybe returning, and Trey Benson, like they could have a really, really elite run game this year. So one way, yes, I think they fixed their run game by drafting Love. I think, very, very much so have fixed their run game, and it could look really great. But for fantasy, I don't know if Love is really the answer because he's not. He's going into a committee, and I think his talent will prove to be the best running back that we see. But he's going as RB13 right now, and that might be a little rich for me just because I think in terms of talent, he's pretty comparable to Ashton Genty. And we saw Genty finish around RB13, last year on a pretty bad Raiders offense. Cardinals' better O-line notwithstanding, Genty finished there because of the amount of touches he got or sometimes didn't get. Love is not going to get as many touches, I don't think, as Genty did last year. And that's where the balance comes in. Okay, better O-line, but more competition. I see him maybe finishing around where Genty did last year, which could, return value based on where you get him. But I don't know, RB13, I see other guys going around him here. Like I would rather have, he's going ahead of, where was he? He's going ahead of ETN right now. and around the same range as Derrick Henry, Chase Brown. There's a lot of question marks for me for Love.
Gosh, man, on this Cardinals team, I do worry about it. I will finish out their O line additions were Isaac Sumalo, guard, Elijah Wilkinson, a tackle, Matt Pryor, guard, and then Chase Basantis, as you said. The coaching staff, because I think this plays into it a lot too. So they added Mike LaFleur as their new head coach. He was previously OC for the Rams, which is could be a fantastic head coach get. Really, he's also a head coach that's had practice under Sean McVay. So he stays in division. They know all about Sean McVay. They want pieces of it, of course. Who doesn't? And it's worked pretty well for a lot of places. As long as it doesn't turn into a news head coach of the Bengals, Zach
Taylor.
Zach Taylor. I was going to say Zach Thomas. I'm like, that is not it. But check this out, because I laughed heartily when I heard this news the first time, and then I got to laugh again when I wrote it down. Their offensive coordinator is Nathaniel Hackett. Nathaniel Hackett, of course, was the Jets' old offensive coordinator during the Rodgers time. He was the first one to go. He looked just god-awful, made some of the worst choices that I've seen of an offensive coordinator almost of any times. I mean, no, it was the Jets and the Broncos, right?
I was going to say that his work as a Jets offensive coordinator pales in comparison to the garbage that was his head coaching with the Broncos.
I didn't even write that down. I just remembered. I was like, oh no, it was the Russell Wilson Broncos too. Yep. Oh man. Oh, so I just can't understand for the life of me how Nathaniel Hackett ended up on this team. I almost feel like that alone brings everyone down so significantly.
It could be a situation where Mike LaFleur is still calling plays. I would want to hope,
And Nathaniel Hackett's just like his best friend, BFF, just coolest dude ever. So he's like, just come hang out with me.
Yeah. Because, the talent on the Cardinals, at least on paper, is maybe slightly better than the Jets was with Hackett there, but Hackett didn't do anything with the talent on the Jets. So the run game is, other big names notwithstanding, the run game is probably going to be the focal point of his offense. And if it's not, again, talent notwithstanding, that's a mess, because you use your third overall pick on a running back and you signed arguably the best backup running back in the league, or one of the best, in Tyler Algier. So if you're spending all this money and the run game isn't the focal point, like, what the heck are we doing?
Oh my gosh. And to still have James Conner there, like I'll even throw out Trey Benson. I probably shouldn't, but I will, just to get this point across. But to still have James Conner there, like the running back group is too stacked to have Jeremiah Love. I feel like there's one of these domino pieces has to fall before the start of the season.
If the Cardinals are smart, they'll either release Trey Benson or trade James Conner to the Vikings, or reunion at the Steelers. Like, the Steelers have solid players, but he could do more work for the Steelers or another team. The Panthers are an option. The Bengals are an option. There's other teams that need. At this point in his career, I think James Conner is an RB2, but he's an RB3, borderline RB4 coming back from injury. So, there's just it doesn't make any sense.
Tyler Algier's agent must be so mad. Michael Wilson, Marvin Harrison Jr. Marvin Harrison Jr. is an interesting case because he has all the talent in the world, was prepped as the next best thing, and then we saw kind of this yo-yo last season of just absolutely zero confidence. Very clear that he had no confidence.
Yeah.
I'm burying the lead here, Willie. Let me follow me for a second. Quarterbacks. You're slated for Jacoby Brissett as your quarterback one this season, but he's holding in. He is not practicing. He showed up at the facility, but he's not practicing at all. He's refusing to because he wants to be paid a starting quarterback salary. Totally fair, Jacoby. They said, hey, we're going to release everyone else and it's you, and then they didn't pay you. I get it. Yeah. You're like, no, I'm out. But like, let's say Jacoby Brissett's not the dude. Okay, you have Gardner Minshew and Carson Beck. Gardner Minshew shouldn't be a starter anywhere anymore. I think that's very clear. And Carson Beck, from all reports that I've heard about him, his biggest knock is that he wasn't going to be ready to start away. So because Michael Wilson had such a good season once Jacoby Brissett was there and Marvin Harrison had fallen off the face of the earth. Michael Wilson's in the contract year. What do you do with Michael Wilson? Is Michael Wilson a player you're willing to add?
This is so hard for me because there's two things here where okay, so I mean there's really three things. So there's the option where Brissett comes back and maybe he does have that chemistry of Wilson again and McBride and they look great again, but we don't even know if Brissett's coming back. And with his run game switch up, like the entire dynamic of the offense, at least on paper, has completely changed. We're not going to see Brissett throwing 40, 50 times a game again. I mean, maybe because they're going to be bad, but you would think that like if the Cardinals are down by 20 points, like obviously throwing the ball makes sense, but they have, some elite running backs to like, I know it doesn't make sense to get the lead back up if you're down by that much, which the Cardinals very well could be. But like when the running backs are never going to see the field if they're just throwing the ball and they're going to be down this much because, they're going to be throwing the ball because they're down. And also like they're not going to be up. So they're not going to be running the ball. So where are those running backs going to be? It's just kind of a nightmare for me. And I think that Wilson's ADP is a factor for me just because of what we saw. And it was with Brissett, but like he clearly had talent just in general. So he could produce a Beck or Minshew, perhaps. But I think Marvin Harrison, I imagine he's going higher than Wilson based on name value. And I don't know what the Cardinals are doing. And I think that if Harrison has a good start to the season, I would probably just trade him because I don't think he wants to be in Arizona. Obviously, the run game is your identity. You already have an elite wide receiver one in Trey McBride. It's like, I don't know. It's just a really big headache for me. It really is.
That's fair. Like Michael Wilson is someone that, in my heart of hearts, I really want to take a shot on, but logically, I can't get you there.
My ideal scenario is that Wilson has another, solid year, but it isn't great because of the Cardinals, and he signs a big contract with like, I don't know, Seattle next year. Imagine like in Seattle as the wide receiver too. Like, oh, sign me up for that. So, maybe he does come back to the Cardinals in the future, but like for this year, I think he's worth a dart throw, but I just don't see him coming. I mean, I don't want to say coming close because maybe, but like he was really magical last year at Brissett, and we don't know if Brissett's going to be there, and the run game is a big factor now. So the talent's there, though. The talent is there.
Okay, so their over-under is at 3.5 wins.
That's really bad.
They went from a 3-win team, did all this changing to make things different, and they ended up at 3.5 wins with the over/under. So this is just Vegas is just predicting a terrible season, and who can blame them at this point? If I saw that, usually I'd be like, "Hey, you want to get in on this passing game, right?" It is so hard for me. Trey McBride, you've already said it's a headache. You taking him in the second round? You taking him in the first round?
It's hard because I mean, we saw him. The recent memory is him Brissett, him becoming solidifying as a superstar with Brissett. Again, he still was pretty damn good with Kyler Murray, and I don't think Carson Beck is Kyler Murray, but I don't want to say maybe he's not quite QB proof, but he probably is. So I wouldn't really. I would be more excited if Brissett's the quarterback, but I still wouldn't downgrade McBride significantly depending on who the quarterback is, just because he's so good. Having said that, though, I think that, and this is, I've had him as my keeper for the past year. So I've had him 2 years in a row, and he's been a superstar for my fantasy team. I love McBride. Second round is a little bit rich, I think, and I do like Bowers quite a bit more, I think, this year, just based on his talent and the upgrade that he's seen. And I only mention Bowers because, like, I think Bowers and McBride are pretty locked into tight end 1 and 2. They are kind of in a tier of their own. I don't really see that changing. I mean, obviously it could, but I think going into drafts at least, I don't see that changing. So I would take, Bowers over McBride. But if you like tight ends, like, and you really want to root for a tight end on your team, you could do worse than McBride. I think that if he falls to the 2-3 turn, if he falls to the third round in general, like I'll definitely snack him there. I think just because the amount of volume he gets and he's gotten every year is just worth it.
That QB situation spooks me so much on this team. Even if Jacoby Brissett's there without a new contract, that's bad blood quarterback play.
Yeah,
I don't think you want that. Like Jacoby Brissett, the best thing about him last year was came in and he had like provided a spark of energy. He was kind of like, I don't care, I'm gonna chuck it over and over again. And if he's in like this, oh, I hate this team, that chemistry is going to be bad. And on a bad team with bad chemistry with a Nathaniel Hackett standing on the sidelines, I've seen that too many times. I don't want to do that again.
that's a factor too, and I think that we haven't seen Hackett with an elite tight end in his coaching or offensive coordinating career, at least not in Denver or New Jersey. But I think I say McBride is QB proof, and I don't worry about him. I do worry about him returning value. I mean, there's also a situation that like we saw Justin Jefferson last year with JJ and Max Brosmer just completely fall off with inconsistent QB play, and tight end's a little bit safer, I think, but still, like there's always that chance. I think that his risk is greater than what his ADP is reflecting. I don't see him returning what he did last year. So, still a great player, but I think that a lot of leagues are going to see him go like early second, and then I just no.
It's too much this year, and I agree. It's just different from last year because the Cardinals were going to be bad last year, but they looked like they had a potential for a competent passing game, and this year it's just I don't know, this new coaching crew, they've been sabotaged from the get.
Yeah, and I mean, again, like we could see Michael Fleur produce as a really solid coach, but then we have Nathaniel Hackett there, and we have just a lot of question marks on the identity of his team. His team has a very fractured identity. There's a lot to get excited about because of the players, but the identity is just really unknown.
I'm all in for like dart throw. Just take the lowest drafted receiver out of Michael Wilson, Marvin Harrison, especially if they're really late. Like if Michael Wilson falls for because what we're saying isn't going to be the first time this is said or the last time this is said. People will catch on to Nathaniel Hackett hanging out around there, and they will downgrade these guys. If Michael Wilson ends up in like round 10, round 11. I'm okay with that dart throw. You can find out pretty quick if it'll be worth it, I think.
He's going around, it looks like wide receiver 27 now, which is really high for me. But again, like you said, he could fall. I think just so many people are going to remember what he did for you last year, and that's just going to auto-inflate his ADP. I could definitely see a world where, and this would take a lot of factors happening, but I could see a world where he's taken in the 8th round, doesn't produce, he gets dropped or traded, and then he produces later in the year. But like with Brissett coming back or some factor. But I think regardless of ADP, Marvin Harrison is not going to fall past like the 7th round. And I think that he definitely has shown talent to prove that he could be a wide receiver one and a great fantasy weapon, but not on this team this year. No.
Yeah, agreed. Okay, so let's go ahead and give our guess for the year-end finishing of the NFC West. I'll start off here. I'm going with the Rams number 1, 49ers number 2, Seahawks number 3, Cardinals number 4.
Yeah, I don't want to just copy you because it's a coin flip for me, but I'm going to go Rams 1. I think Rams are, I believe all the media hype. Like if they don't win the Super Bowl this year, it's going to be disappointing. That's how good their team is, like legitimately. And I don't say that often. I will say Seahawks 2, Niners 3, but easily could see those flip. I think they finished around the same record. And yeah, I think the Cardinals probably can beat their win total of 3.5 just based on some games where it's closer than expected, and Jeremiah Love rips off a 40-yard run. Algier rips off a 40-yard run. Like they have some superstar like speedsters and breakaway players that could make close games closer than you think. So I could see them finishing with 5 wins just based on their offensive potential. But if the Cardinals win the NFC West, I can't think of anything to compare it to. Wow.
It's probably worth throwing down $5 if you want to just a crazy bet, because the odds have got to be so stacked against it.
I think you would. I think I really could see it like a $200 payout. I don't know how Vegas odds always work, but that's like legitimately that's what it should be.
Yeah. Okay, so that is the NFC West.